RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Let's build a RAG application with LangChain and Next.js. Hello and welcome, I'm Dave. Today we'll build an AI RAG application with LangChain and Next.js. And I'll provide links to all resources in the description below. I'll also provide a link for you to join my Discord server where you can discuss web development with other students, and you can ask questions that I can answer and receive help from other viewers too. I look forward to seeing you there. Hey guys, we recently built a simple AI chatbot application with Next.js, and that's the type of project I believe at a minimum that you should currently have in your portfolio of projects. However, this week we're going to make it so much better. We're going to take our simple chatbot and turn it into a RAG application using LangChain and Next.js. Let's quickly look at what RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, actually means to us. We start with a large language model. We powered our chatbot with OpenAI, but LLMs are generalists and they're trained on publicly available data. And that gives us three problem areas with LLMs. The first is a lack of domain knowledge. LLMs don't know anything about your specific data. The second is hallucinations. Large language models will sometimes simply make up answers. And the third is data cutoffs. Large language models have training data cutoffs and don't know anything beyond that certain date. We can improve all of those issues with RAG, that's Retrieval Augmented Generation. We can provide domain-specific data, and by supplying our specific information, we will also reduce hallucinations. And we can keep our data updated as often as needed. So how does RAG work? In our simple chat app, we asked a question which was passed to the AI LLM, which then provided us with a response. But with RAG, we add a step. We start with a question prompt, and then there is a data retrieval step. Then the prompt with the data context is passed to the AI LLM, and a better response is provided. So let's get started setting up the LangChain framework. I'm on the introduction page of the LangChain documents, and it says here that LangChain is a framework for developing applications powered by large language models, and that is what we're going to build today. It also says LangChain simplifies every stage of the large language model application lifecycle, and like any framework should, it should abstract and simplify some things for us, although LangChain is still complicated to work with. I also want to note while we're on the docs that LangChain has both Python and JavaScript documentation. This is actually the introduction page in the Python docs, and you can go to this drop menu here at the top where you see the parrot and the chain and choose the JSTS docs. So I'll do that. We get just a little bit more information here. The page is different. It says LangChain is a framework for developing applications powered by language models that are context aware. So you can connect a language model to sources of context. And that's what we'll do with the RAG pattern, where we retrieve some information from a document, and then we will use prompt instructions to interact and reason here with the large language model about that document and use that information so we can actually have a chat conversation in our application. I'm in the GitHub repository for the starter code. This would be the simple AI chatbot that I created in the previous video that I'll also link to in the description. And you could start with this and improve the chatbot like I did. But I don't normally do this, but I'm going to recommend that you actually download the completed source code for this video and simply follow along, because I'm going to go over the different processes and concepts and give several different examples. And then at the end, you should take this project and make it your own. So look for those links in the video description. I'm also once again using OpenAI for this tutorial. So if you don't have an OpenAI account, you'll need to go there and set up an account, because we'll need access to the OpenAI API. Hey guys, just a quick note on the OpenAI API. It does require a credit card for your account, but it only costs pennies. I've been using it a lot and I haven't spent much at all. Now, there were some comments on the last video that complained about having a cost for anything, and I realize that I provide many free videos and there's lots of free resources on the web. But when it comes to working with this new AI technology, OpenAI is the one that most consider, and that's why I'm using it in this tutorial. Please don't complain in the comments about the cost. Spend a few pennies on yourself to learn the latest technology. Okay, moving on. Okay guys, you have downloaded the code, either the starter code or the completed code, and you've got your OpenAI key or OpenAI API key, and you should have that now in your .env.local file that we see over here in the file tree. I'm not going to show you mine, and of course you shouldn't put yours in GitHub either. You'll need to create this file even though you download the code from my repository. Now, after that, we're looking at the dependencies here. You won't have your node modules installed, so you will want to open up a terminal window and type npm I or npm install and press enter, and that will install all of the same dependencies that I have. And that is especially important for this tutorial if you want it to last, I don't know, to next week or next month or a few months after I publish this, because both Next.js and LangChain are libraries that are, or frameworks, I should say, that are constantly changing and updating. So there could be deprecations and things break if you simply install the latest packages. But if you install using my package JSON, so after you've downloaded the code, just by typing npm install, you should get the exact versions of dependencies that I have here, and your code will work exactly as mine does in this video. Now, compared to the simple chat application tutorial that I had previously created, I have added the @LangChain/OpenAI dependency, and then also simply the LangChain dependency. Those are the two new ones. So now let's look at some of the code that we had before, and first the front end component chat.tsx. Not much has changed. I just want to highlight that the use chat hook that we get from the Vercel AI SDK, I have put in a couple of options. One is the API, where we're going for the endpoint, the route handler. By default, if you don't specify this, it goes to API/chat. And that's what we have here in our chat endpoint under API. So we do have a route.ts file there that we were previously using. But I'm going to change this for every example. You can see I've got 4 examples over here in the file tree today. Then I also added an on-error handler just so we could see an error in the console. I've found that's very helpful. So you'll want that in there as you experiment with this as well. So for every example, we're going to look at a different route.ts file. We'll look at the one that we had from the last tutorial first. You can see there aren't many imports at the top, just OpenAI from OpenAI, and then OpenAI stream and streaming text response, because we want to stream that response back and get it as fast as possible. This has the runtime edge. Now, just since I made that last video, Vercel has decided to move away from the runtime edge. So you'll see in my other examples that I'm actually going to use that export const dynamic equals force dynamic. And I would recommend changing this one as well. And maybe I'll do that before I go ahead and upload the completed source code here for this example. Other than that, I'm bringing in the Open API key here, and then we have the post request that is sent in. We get the chat message, and then of course we open up OpenAI here, and we use the model that we pick. You can pick any model you want. I'm using GPT 3.5 Turbo. Set stream to true, send our message, we get a response. It's very simple. Then stream that back here using OpenAI stream and the streaming text response. So that is the code we previously had. Let's quickly run that just so you can see how it works in the browser as well. So I'll get rid of that npm stall. I'll type npm run dev. We'll get this started on our local host here. I'll control click localhost 3000. This should start it up and open up the application. I'm in dark mode. You could switch it to light mode in your globals.css file if you want to. So I can just type any question I want here, like, what do you know about Kansas, which is the state that I live in the US. And we've got a fairly lengthy answer back here. And this is basically a wrapper around OpenAI. So this was our simple chatbot. Let's see how we can improve this now by learning about LangChain, and eventually we'll add that RAG pattern with our own data. Okay, back in VS Code, I'm going to close the terminal window. Let's go to this chat.tsx file and switch chat to exex1. There we go. And so we'll use this example 1 endpoint now. And now let's look at that route handler. So I'll open that up in the file tree. and we'll see a few things that are different. Notice some of the dependencies are different right away. One of the things I noted, again, things change fast and get deprecated, is the use chat hook needed some help with these LangChain examples. So I also needed to import the create stream data transformer, and we use that along with the streaming text response. Then I'm bringing in chat OpenAI. Instead of our previous example that just used OpenAI directly, now we're using LangChain. So I'm bringing that in from LangChain OpenAI. I also need a prompt template that we're going to send a prompt to chat with. And then I need the HTTP response output parser from LangChain. Here is that chain I noticed here, or I noted before, dynamic equals force dynamic instead of the edge runtime. And then here's the route handler itself. Again, a post request, we get all of the messages as we did before. Notice now I'm getting the last message from an array of messages here, and that is the content. So we want .content, so I have that one message. Now I'm not getting the message history yet, but we're preparing to do that in the next example. So now I'm just getting the current message. I've also got a prompt creation here. I'm using that prompt template from template, and right now I'm just passing in the message, essentially the question I'm going to send. And then I have the model. This is a little bit different than that first example because now we're using LangChain. So we use chat OpenAI and we pass in the API key. Some previous videos and examples I've seen of this, it used to bring in the API key automatically and you didn't have to provide it here. It would just read it, but now they're recommending that you do add it here. So note that. Once again, the model, and then the temperature, which is something we didn't previously set. The temperature kind of gauges the responses and how they will vary. So if you're working with very factual data, you would probably want to set this very low, maybe even to 0. But if you want a variance in the responses, you can set the temperature higher. However, you may also get more hallucinations with a higher value. And this goes from 0 to 1. So notice I'm at 0.8. Okay, we'll scroll down here. We're defining a parser now, and that is that HTTP response output parser that we input. And now we define a chain, and this is what LangChain is all about. So we created our prompt above, then I'm saying .pipe, and I'm passing in the model. And then I'm saying .pipe once again, and passing in the parser. This is a very simple chain, very easy way to create it here as well. And we'll look before we're finished at a more complex way to create a chain. But this is a simple chain for now, just passing in the question. I'm once again awaiting that stream and I'm passing in a message. And after I get that, by the way, I've commented this out here, but you could do this if you wanted to actually look in your console to see each chunk of the stream, and you would see like one word at a time on each line inside of your console. So I left this commented out for you, but you can play around with that. And now we're sending that streaming text response. But note, this is the thing I said about the use chat hook, that it now needed this create stream data transformer. And they may fix this in the future where you could once again just pass in the stream that was created up above here. Here's just the stream. You could pass that in parentheses. All of the examples show that. I had to actually dig into some GitHub issues to see that they were currently working through something with the LangChain response and how they send that with the use chat hook or how they receive it. So here's the streaming text response and we're sending that information back. And we have all that in a try catch, so we could catch an error if we needed to. Okay, with that, we've already changed this endpoint to example 1. I think we still have the server running here. Yes, we do. So let's go back to Chrome and test this out now. So now I can type a question like, tell me a joke, see what it says. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? And it gives us the answer right away, because it was too tired. You know, I don't know how good the joke is, but the point is it got what we were telling it. Now, again, we've just implemented LangChain, but this is basically like our first example, but we're using LangChain now. So it's still, once again, a simple wrapper around OpenAI. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the video. You may be surprised to learn that 3 out of every 4 viewers, nearly 75% of all people who watch my channel, aren't subscribed. So I just wanted to take a quick second and remind you to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. And if you really like my videos, you can get exclusive content and support my channel even more by joining my Patreon at patreon.com/DaveGray. Thanks for your consideration, and now back to the video. But what if I wanted a conversation here where I say, tell me a joke, and then I just wanted it to maybe ask the question, which is a pattern it seems to have, and then I wanted to say something like says, why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself? Maybe I want it to wait so I can say, why? And then it answers, because it was too tired. Well, the only real way to do that is, and I'll show how to stop the text here when it receives a character like a question mark, but the only really way you can do that is to have the chat history as well, so it can refer back to what it asked you in the first part of the joke. So let's set that up in example 2. Back in VS Code, I've got the chat component open once again. I am changing that endpoint to example 2. I keep typing 3, changing it to example 2. And now let's look at the route handler for example 2. Very much like the first one as far as the imports, notice one additional endpoint. Now we have message as Vercel chat message. That's the only thing we changed up here at the top. If we scroll down now, notice we have a format message function where I am using that message type, that Vercel chat message, and we are formatting all of these messages. And that's because we're going to have a message history. So we're going to have a message role where it's either the user or the assistant, and we're going to have the message content. And now let me go ahead and press Alt-Z. And you can see I have added a template here as well. Before we were previously just passing in the message. Now there's a lot more information here. So our template says you are a comedian, you have witty replies to user questions, and you tell jokes. Then we have the current conversation noted with a chat history placeholder here. Then it says user, and it shows the input. And then it says assistant, which would be the AI. So that is all of our template. Note the backticks here because this is on multiple lines. So I could create a template on multiple lines, wrapping that in backticks like a template literal. But note also, of course, these placeholders aren't quite the same. You don't put a $sign in front. So it's not the template literal that you're used to where you're passing in a variable or something in that manner. So you just put those inside of these curly braces. Okay, let's scroll down and look at the route handler itself. Once again, we get the messages, but now we need that chat history again. So we have formatted previous messages. We get that by using that messages array, and we're slicing, and then we're mapping it over and passing in that format message to format each message in the history. We're once again getting the current message as well and getting it the same way we did before. Now when we create our prompt, we're passing in our template from above that I defined up here. And then we once again define the prompt. We still have the model. Nothing has changed here except notice I also passed in verbose true. So now if you look in the Node.js or Next.js console here, if we control backtick to open up the terminal, once we start using this, you'll see a lot more output because verbose true kind of has this walk you through everything that it's doing. So I wanted to include that so you knew about that. I left the temperature where it is for now. But notice what we're doing here when we create the chain. The parser's the same, but now as I pipe the model in, I'm adding .bind and I'm telling it to stop at the question mark. So that will get it to stop at the end of its question and not give us that second part of the joke. So it will absolutely stop, and it won't actually know what it's going to say next. We're going to have to provide that history so then it can read, the large language model can read what it actually previously asked us, and then of course it will see our response that will be why or what or something simple like that. So now when we have this chain.stream that we await here, we're not only passing in the input with the current message, we're also passing in the chat history. Notice this is an array and we're using .join and we're joining on the line breaks here, the /in. After that, we stream it in the same way we did before. So that is the difference. So let's go ahead and make sure, yes, we're on example 2. Let's go back to Chrome now. And it looks like everything has refreshed. I'm going to go ahead and manually refresh just in case. Now I'm going to say, tell me a joke. And it should stop. It says, why don't scientists trust atoms? Now notice it doesn't have the question mark there because I put it in that bind and told it to stop there. It omitted the question mark. But besides that, we did get it to stop after it asked us a question. And then I can just say, why. Now it should read the history, and then it knew right away what it had asked us, and it replied with the second half of the joke. So that's a way to tell that it's actually using the history. And also, if we go back in and look at this verbose setting that we had, we can see exactly how it thought through all of that. But there is a lot here to look at. So we'll have to scroll back to the very first one that it did. And here we are. So you can see it received all of that direction from the template. And if we scroll down, you can see it sent, "Why don't scientists trust atoms?" Of course, after it said sure, when we said tell me a joke, but then it received the stop. After that, that is all it sent. It just had this here in the keyword arguments as well. So we'll come down here. Now here is the next entry, and you can see what else it received. So here is that content once again, but it has more than it did before. Now it had the current conversation, and it said, "User, tell me a joke." Assistant, sure, and here was the joke, and then user again, why, waiting on the assistant reply. So it had all of that conversation to base its reply on, and then it gave us the reply, which was the second half of the joke. Moving to example 3, I'll close the terminal. Let's go to the chat component, and now I should be able to change this to 3. And after that, let's look at that example. And you noted from the last example, we were able to kind of add a comedian personality to our chatbot as well. Well, this now is the example that is more from the docs as far as the template was, where they turn the prompt, or they use the prompt to turn the chatbot into a pirate named Patchy. And his directions say all responses must be extremely verbose and in pirate dialect. So that gets fairly interesting as well. Here, once again, you can see we're passing in the chat history and the user input. Nothing else really changed. I just wanted to give a different example of how you can actually prompt through LangChain and add a personality to the large language model. So let's go ahead and go back to Chrome once again, and I'll refresh just to be sure. And now let's tell Patchy that we want to hear a joke. So I'll say, "Tell me a joke." And let's see what we get here. Oh, pirate dialogue for sure. It says, "R, matey, you be wanting a joke, do you?" And I'm not going to read through all of that. I don't sound like a good pirate at all. But the point is, you can add a different personality, and we didn't hardly change anything else except those prompt directions. But this is just kind of how we work with LangChain, and we've improved and added a personality to our bot. But now, how do we actually apply that RAG pattern? How can we add in our own data, that extra step? Well, let's look at the final example. Back in VS Code, I'm going to change the chat component to use example 4. And after saving that, let's look at the route handler for example 4. Now this will have a few more changes to it than we saw before. And actually I have 2 examples in one here. We're going to use JSON data because that is frequently used on the web. And we're going to look at how you can bring in JSON from a document, but also how you could possibly just use a JSON object and chat with the data that's in that object. So to start out with, we have all of the same imports that we did in the other examples up here at the top. But now I've added a few more. So I added line space here on line 9 just to delineate the difference here. So you can see what else we're adding. We're adding the JSON loader. We're also adding runnable sequence. Before we were piping our chain, and this is just a different way to do it, and we needed a little bit more complexity in this example. I also have format documents as string because we're going to have documents, and that's what LangChain calls the data that we'll load in from our JSON loader, for example. And then I've also got this character text splitter, and you can see right now I'm not using that, but it is in one of the examples, and that's because you would use it with a JSON object and instead of a file. So I wanted to also have that in here. So notice here before, we haven't even got to the route handler yet, but here is my loader, and I'm loading in some JSON data. I have a data file here in a data folder called states.json. It has information about all 50 United States. And when I'm loading this, I could just load the file here with this first param, but I'll press Alt-Z to wrap this down. Here I'm actually pointing to specific properties in the JSON data. So you can do it that way too. You can load a file, but maybe you only want a few of the properties. I'm loading quite a few, but I just wanted to highlight that you can load specific properties instead of loading all of the properties. After that, we once again have the dynamic equals force dynamic. We still have the format message function. Now let's look at the template. It's changed quite a bit. It says answer the user's questions based only on the following context. If the answer is not in the context, reply politely that you do not have that information available. Now we're providing a placeholder for the context that we're also identifying here in the template. We still have the chat history. Now we have a user question. Before, note, I called that input. You could still call it whatever you want, but it just made more sense to me in this template as I set it up. I used question. Now let's get to the route handler. We still bring in the messages. We still have the message history with format previous messages. Still have the current message. Here is where we're loading the documents from the JSON file. And once again, that's what LangChain would call these. So each object would be a document essentially, and it has its own format for that. So we get docs, and we use await loader.load. But let's also look at how we could do this with an object instead. So I'm going to comment this out. Then I will uncomment this object example here that uses the text splitter that I talked about before. So uncommenting all of that, here is one state object with the different properties that I wanted to load in, the state of Kansas, where I live in the United States. I'm using the text splitter. Then the docs equal await text splitter dot create documents. And then inside of an array bracket here, I've got JSON stringify, and I'm passing in my object. Of course, you could pass in more than one object if you wanted to, because we're just using JSON stringify that you're probably already familiar with. But you could have a prior fetched or created JSON object and pass it in this way if you want to. So I'm going to run the example with just this one object to start out with, and then we'll go back and then we'll read the file, and it will have data on more than just one state so we can compare. Once again, when we create the prompt, we just pass in the template. The OpenAI chat has changed just a little bit. Notice I have gone ahead and set the temperature to 0. So that was an important difference here. I left verbose to true also. I can't remember if I had streaming in the others or not. We were streaming using the Vercel AI SDK anyway, but I've got streaming set to true here inside of Chat OpenAI as well. Okay, we get down to the parser and it's the same, but now this is what has really changed. Here is that runnable sequence as we define our chain. We've got runnable sequence dot from, and I'm passing in some input. Now this input comes from when we call the chain here, at least most of it does, because the question receives input, and you can see that's input question. These all just get passed down the chain. The next is chat history. It's input.chat history, which relates to what we pass in down here as well. Notice the context. We don't really pass anything in there. We've already got the docs from above. We don't pass that through here. This is just separate here. So we have format documents as string, which was imported at the top as well, because this does need to be a string, and I'm passing in the docs. Then through the chain, we go to the prompt, to the model, and the parser, just like we did with the previous piping. But we wanted to send this information in here as well. So that was definitely different than before. We needed a spot to pass in that context. And this shows you how to use a runnable sequence. And it's a simple one because LangChain can get much, much more complicated, and you can chain together many separate chains that you create. However, this works for this, and we get our history. We also get our RAG because we've retrieved that document and all the data inside the JSON document, or in this case, the first example I'm going to use is just this object. And then we're going to stream that back. Everything else works the same. So let's check this out now in the browser with example 4 in our chat component, and we should be able to chat with our JSON object about Kansas. And here I'll say, what can you tell me about? I can tell you about Kansas. That's really all it knows about right now. So let's ask a few questions, like what is the capital of Kansas? And the capital of Kansas is Topeka. That is correct. Let me go ahead and ask, what date was it admitted to the US. And notice I said it instead of Kansas, but from the chat history, it should still know we're talking about Kansas. And we get the date back that it was admitted. So this is what I would expect. Now let's go back to VS Code and switch it to use the JSON document that has all 50 states. Okay, I'm back in VS Code. In example 4, I'm going to uncomment line 49 where we load the docs from the loader, and then I'm going to comment out line 52 through 67 where we had our large object for the state of Kansas. But now we should get data from our states.json file that should have all 50 states in it. Let's go back and check that out. Okay, I'm going to start the conversation with hello and see what it says. Oh, how can I assist you? That's nice. I'll say, what is the capital of Kansas? Topeka. Nice short answer, but that works. Now I can say, what is the nickname of California? The Golden State. Nice. Now I'm going to say, what state did I ask about before California? And it remembers I asked about Kansas. I'm going to say, does it have a Twitter? Notice I used it in the context of my conversation. So I'm talking about Kansas because I asked about that when I said, what state did I ask about before California? Let's see what it says. So yes, it does. Okay, I'll say, what is it? There we go, twitter.com/ksgovernment. That would be the Twitter account for Kansas. Now I'm going to ask for something that I know is not in the context file. And remember, our prompt told it to only provide that information if it was in that file. Now I'm going to ask it for something that I know is not in the context file. And remember our template in our prompt, it asked it to only provide the information that is in the context file. So I'm going to say, what is the state bird? And let's see what it says. I do not have that information available. Now, if we hadn't told it to do that, the large language model could use its other sources and actually say that the state bird is the western meadowlark, and it would be able to do that. So it's all in prompt engineering, which is another huge area to learn about. So congratulations, you now have a RAG application. Now, learning LangChain can get very complex, but like most things, the more you work with it, the easier it will become. I recommend learning more about it by building your own project. Do something like a chat with your resume or a chat with a PDF document. LangChain provides loaders for all different types of files and data. And from there, you'll get started learning more about embeddings, vector databases, and all types of retrieval chains. It's a large topic and there's a lot to learn, but without a doubt, it will only benefit you in today's job market. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Hey guys, giving a quick shout out to my patrons. Holy Coder is a progress provider and Eldad is a member at the senior level. Also, thank you to all of the junior members. You're all helping me reach my goals. And if you haven't checked out my Patreon, it's got exclusive content and early release content. And it's not one of those Patreons that doesn't get many posts. I'm active on there every week, so please check it out if you haven't. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection. And a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you. And thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.